Today on the Grow Along we're going to be sowing our Ammi majus. Next, it's just got to be some Ammi, hasn't it? Look at that. I've always found Ammi majus quite easy to grow. It likes a warm daytime temperature with a cooler evening temperature, around 15 to 18 degrees during the day. It's usually naturally that temperature in the greenhouse. However, the last couple of years our weather has been all over the place, and I know that some of you have got greenhouses which are not in the ideal positions. So I have done a little bit of an experiment. So here we've got our Ammi majus seeds. I've opened the envelope and the foil carefully so I can put any seeds I don't need back. Here's our seeds. You can see they are very small. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a small impression in the compost, and then sow one seed per cell, or as best you can. They're very easy to prick out later if you end up with two germinating in the same cell. There we go. And then what you can do is you can either sift a little bit of compost over the top, or you can just cover them up gently, like I'm doing here, with some nice moist compost. Now it's not essential, but darkness and a little bit of pre-chilling just helps things along, speeds up the process of germination. So if you're an impatient gardener like me, then you might want to do the same. You're curious now, aren't you? So look, I'm going to do an experiment. Here you can see my labels. These seeds we've just sown, chilled and buried, but then I've done another couple of rows of seeds which I've chilled, but then I haven't covered them. And on the other end we've got seeds that have been buried but not chilled. Put the Ammi majus up here on the top shelf in a light bright position. As a result of my experiment, I've now changed the Autumn Jumpstarter Handbook with the advice that you can help things along. You can increase germination rates and the speed of germination by pre-chilling the seeds in the fridge for 2 weeks, and then when you sow them, to cover them over with compost. I've done an experiment where I've sown some seeds that I've buried but not chilled, some seeds that I've chilled but not buried, and the seeds that I have chilled and buried. So I'm going to show you that seed tray right now. We've got my controlled experiment, and you can see that this section here is germinating faster. Now these seeds, you can see from the label, were both chilled and then buried. Then by contrast, you can see from the label, these seeds were chilled but they were not buried, and you can actually see them on the surface. They are still germinating, but the chilling has actually given them a jump start. For this side, these seeds were not chilled and they were buried. So all that's happening is the compost is keeping them a bit warm. So if you're going to do anything, the chilling really helps. So chilling and then burying the seeds is the quickest way to get germination to occur. However, they will still germinate. You're just going to have to wait a little bit longer for Mother Nature to chill the seeds out in the greenhouse, and then they will start germinating naturally, which, to be fair, is what I have always done, because I've never been in a particular hurry. However, I do like an experiment. It makes life more interesting, doesn't it? The Ammi, or some of them, are starting to get their true leaves now. So this is the true leaf coming through. I'm just potting on my Ammi majus plants. Look at that. They got a fantastic root ball. Some are bigger than others. They will all catch up there. We've got plenty of time until they flower in the garden. They're going in the 15 cell trays now, and then we'll plant them straight out because they're very hardy. Daylight triggers them to flower. So if you've ever grown Ammi majus and been disappointed, it's probably because you sowed them in spring and they didn't have long enough to grow before the light triggered them into blooming. Ammi majus is light sensitive, so that means it is triggered by daylight in the spring and early summer into flower formation. So we need to sow it in the autumn so it's got enough time to grow into a strong, robust plant before it starts flowering. Sow it too late, sow it in the spring, you'll find that it gets not very tall at all before the blooming is initiated, and you'll have a very disappointing plant. So that's the reason I'm quite evangelical about planting our Ammi majus in the autumn jump starter. But you can see these are the Ammi majus, the cornflowers just behind. They look happy as Larry, don't they? They look better now than they did when I first put them out from inside the greenhouse. I think all the fresh air is really agreeing with them. The Ammi majus is under our belt, no need for a propagator lid. It is extremely hardy. We will be planting it out in the garden in late winter or early spring, and we'll be hardening it off probably January, February time. We'll take them out of the greenhouse and start hardening them off before we start sowing our late winter stocks, scabious and melope, for example. So that will give us a bit of room. Autumn jump starter Ammi majus. Spacing 30 centimetres apart. Absolutely fantastic. Make sure you harden it off first though, eh? Quick update on the Ammi majus. My goodness me, doesn't that look happy? Absolutely brilliant. Now we have got a little bit of enviromesh over the top because we have found that sometimes pigeons like to snack on Ammi majus, and that's not funny. So we've covered them up. This seems to be enough. It flaps in the wind, I think scares them off. Never had it before, but still need to stake Ammi majus. It is going to tower over you. So good firm staking. Put it in at planting time. It's much easier to do that. Ammi majus has got a relatively small root compared to the eventual size of the plant, and if the wind is allowed to blow it around, what will happen is it will rock backwards and forwards and weaken the anchor that it has in the ground. Those roots will get ripped away from the soil, and they will no longer be able to transport the water and the nutrients needed to sustain a plant of that size. Now, Ammi majus isn't cut and come again. So you don't want to hack at it, just cut out the flowers that are ready for harvesting. And that's the reason why we grow it from an autumn jump starter, so that we can get the maximum height out of the plant before it starts flowering, and then that gives us the most amount of blooms. I've set this tape measure at 8 feet, so you can see we're not quite at 8 feet, probably about 7.5 foot. A lot taller than me in any case. Want to recap on anything we've talked about, then you can also turn to the Autumn Jump Starter Handbook 2022. All this new information is included there for you. You can see there are rules, and if you follow the rules, each individual seed variety is different. So if you follow the rules, you will get the best results. For example, larkspur needs pre-chilling, but it also needs a steady greenhouse temperature of ideally below 13 degrees. Otherwise, it just won't germinate. And our greenhouses have been much warmer than that. So that's the reason why we've not sown the seed yet. If you sow the seed too early, it will just sit there. And if you keep watering the trays because the greenhouse is warm and they keep drying out, the chances are you could accidentally rot the seed. So the best thing to do is leave it in your packets. I am keeping an eye on the temperatures, don't worry. And as soon as I see that the conditions are right, I will give you the nod and we'll sow our other seeds.